Welcome. Tonight we enter the world of silk sweat and the subtle power plays of the harems of feudal Japan. Imagine you have been trained all your life to master a single art, the art of seduction. From the way you walk, to the way you sigh, to the way you can seduce a daimyo with the perfect tilt of your wrist. But before we get started on this strange journey, if you really like what you hear, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always interesting to know who's listening from all over the world. Now lower the lights, turn on the fan to let in some gentle breeze, and we will quietly drift off into tonight's adventure. Dawn came as softly as a knock on the door. No rooster crowing, no noise. Just the dim light filtering through the rice paper door and the soft footsteps of the servants trying to pretend they didn't notice your messy position on the futon. You lie perfectly still, not because you've had enough sleep, but because any sudden movement would ruin the graceful and mysterious image you've been trying to project since morning. In reality, your back is aching, your hair is flat on one side, and you had a strange dream about eels last night that you don't want to analyze. But none of that matters now. This is the prelude to the day's performance. You're both the main character and the stage decoration. The maids entered bowing so softly and respectfully that you wondered if you should step over them. A basin of warm water was placed before them, as if whispering, "This is the dignity of the young lady, please wash yourself clean." They begin their usual routine, washing, grooming, transforming you from a sleepyhead into a perfect porcelain statue. Your face is gently washed. Your hair is brushed with reverence, not out of love for you, but because they have seen what happens to palace maids who dare to appear before the court with disheveled hair. And you, keep your standard expression calm, distant, just a slight frown. No talking, absolutely no talking until you're powdered. You silently glance at your reflection in the polished brass mirror, a face that looks like it has a lot of opinions, but is being paid not to show them. Perfect. From behind the sliding door came the deep laughter of the great man. He seemed to have a lot of energy this morning. This could be a good sign, or a very bad one. You made a mental note to avoid eye contact with his main favorite concubine until you finished your tea. You slide off the futon like a swan emerging from the mist, if the swan had numb legs, and knew it was about to be tied up in a stiff obi. The sleeves are laid out. The incense is burning. The act has begun. You stretch gently and whisper the universal incantation of women everywhere. Here we go again, Suka. Now comes the makeup, or more accurately, the art of self-erasure with a little poison. The first step, white powder ground rice, and in some cases enough lead to build a house. The maid starts patting your face as if she were covering up a crime scene. The goal to erase all signs of life. If your skin looks like something natural, you're doing it wrong. You also need to powder your neck and chest. What if the big shot sees something that hasn't been covered properly? You try to hold in a sneeze. Even one sneeze could ruin your new look. Then the eyebrows. Meaningless. Erased and redrawn a few centimeters higher, leaving the face always surprised and indifferent, mysteriously charming. Lips, Thought it was all painted, but no. Just a tiny red dot in the middle of the lips. Like kiss the plum and run away. Weird, but you still have to nod in satisfaction. That's tradition, the weirder, the more true. And finally, the ultimate in weirdness, black teeth. A sticky iron paste smeared on teeth that makes a smile look censored, meaning taken. Reality baffling. Throughout this process, you remain as still as a statue being vandalized by a team of polite painters. No movement, no asking, is this really necessary? Because the answer is always yes, even though no one remembers why. When you're done, you look like a walking painting. The kind that hates human skin and loves drama. Next, dressing. Not the quick fix kind, but a ritual that tests one's endurance with fabric. First layer, a thin cotton lining to prevent the outer kimono from sticking to the skin in the summer sun. Not very effective, but better than nothing. Then there is the inner garment, beautiful, symbolic, and useless, except that it is absolutely necessary. The wrong color combination is a sure sign of a downward spiral. The outer kimono, heavy, glittering, merciless. The sleeves are long enough to strangle an opponent if need be. The reason no one dares stand close to you right now. Finally, the obi. The wide belt that tightens so much it reminds you. Take a deep breath, dream on. A beautiful obi is a symbol of refinement, elegance, and quiet desperation. You stand still. The two maids wrap, fold, pull, adjust, as if trying to turn you into living origami. No words are spoken except for the occasional soft humph when the fabric doesn't lie quite right. You get the signal. When you're done, you have no feeling in your chest, but you look as gorgeous as a precious scroll, your eyes full of meaning. And the irony is that this is just your everyday clothes. You have no plans other than to sit in the garden and pretend to read poetry all morning. But you have to be dressed for it, in case someone wants to draw your portrait or invite you over unexpectedly. Breakfast arrives, the ritual of self-control. Sit up straight, back straight. Don't let your sleeves get in the miso soup. The tray is laid out, rice, thinly grilled fish, 3 pickles, a bowl of miso that looks at you with disdain. Eat not to be full, but to maintain a poetic and fragile slimness. Eating too deliciously is wrong. Asking for more is a sin. Chewing too happily is also forbidden. Each chopstick move is like sword fighting, dodging giant sleeves, leaning at the right angle, praying not to splatter tofu onto the tatami mats. The maid stood behind him, saying nothing but definitely secretly taking notes of every mistake for future gossip. After eating, you bow your head and put down your chopsticks as if to worship your ancestors. Satisfied numbers sufficient nutrition. Hard to say, but your soul feels lighter. Maybe because the obi is cutting off blood circulation, and so you're ready for the main part of the day, waiting. Waiting in silence. In a yes, I'm free but powerful manner. Not being able to move freely, scandals lurk outside. Just sitting in the waiting room next to the bonsai garden, the fish pond has been quiet since last fall. Adjust your posture. so that it looks like you are contemplating life, not like your legs are numb. Don't be impatient. That's the job of the first wife. The concubine waits as if she is doing the world a favor. How long? 10 minutes or 5 hours? Whatever the big shot wants. He could be with someone else reading war poems or sleeping on a silk pillow. You'll know, or you won't. Killing time. Writing poetry badly, playing the shamisen slowly, not at all cheerfully. Others are waiting too. Maybe in secret competition. And so the waiting continues. Not that frantic, foot-tapping, impatient sort of waiting. No. This is an art form all its own. A quiet war waged in silk and perfume where every glance is measured, every breath released like poetry, and every delicate tilt of the head is laced with calculated meaning. Around you, the other concubines perch like painted cranes, beautiful, motionless, endlessly watchful. It is a silent contest, waged not with swords, but with subtleties. Who can seem the most serene, whose sleeve falls just so across the wrist, whose obi knot sits slightly daringly off-center, as if to whisper confidence without a word. And who, oh who, caught the eye of the messenger boy delivering tea to the daimo's chambers just now? Chess played with glances and posture instead of pawns. With every breath, you must convey indifference, though your stomach knots itself into origami. You must appear utterly at ease, as if your very worth as a woman, as a court ornament, as a rival among rivals, did not hang upon the whim of being summoned this evening. But of course it does. Still, you are a professional. You sigh softly, elegantly, and let your gaze drift toward the garden outside. A falling leaf, a drifting koi fish, both symbols of quiet patience. Both just as bored as you. The morning was for preparation, the afternoon for positioning. Not yoga, no. This is the far older, far sharper art of courtly survival dressed in brocade and plum blossom oil. By now the other women have gathered, fully forming a dangerous bouquet of smiles and murmured compliments. You exchange nods, shallow bows, smiles like sheathed daggers, warm in appearance, cold in intent. This is no sisterhood. This is elegant espionage. Every woman watches, listens, plots. And all in the name of reputation, preserving one's own and gently, politely unraveling everyone else's. No shrieking, no open insults. That would be crude. Instead, silence, observation, and death by 1,000 flower petal cuts. Lady Aiko's calligraphy has improved. Someone says sweetly. Translation: she used to write like a drunken monk. The daimo seemed very peaceful this morning. Another murmurs. Translation: he didn't summon you, did he? And then the classic, you look radiant today. Which of course means, congratulations on looking less like a corpse than usual. Compliments here are verbal shuriken, polished to shine, flung to wound. The sharper the smile, the deeper the cut. A single, perfectly timed observation about a kimono pattern being bravely modern can cause a week of sleepless integrity. You must glide through this with grace, or at least the perfect illusion of it. Smile gently. Tilt your head just so when someone spouts a haiku clearly stolen from an old painted screen. Appear impressed. Appear kind. Appear harmless. The most dangerous mask of all, and then it happens. A whisper soft as silk threads the air. The daimyo was seen in the garden, pausing, gazing thoughtfully at a fan left accidentally by one of the others. The room stiffens, modified. No one breathes, but no one panics. Not outwardly. This is when the performance deepens. You must look interested, but not too interested. Interested, but unattainable. Desirable, but untouched. Like a rare dessert no one dares ruin by tasting. You are artistic. You are myths. You are porcelain perfection wrapped in mystery and plum blossom oil. And all the while you smile gently. Speak softly. Insult indirectly. This is how wars are won here, not by battle, but by whispers. If you leave this room with even one competing, wondering if her obi was too tight, her poem too clumsy, her scent too strong, you have triumphed. But the summons did not come. Yet, hope like anxiety lingers beneath your 12 layers of silk. As the sun crawls past its peak and you survive another silent war of glances, it's time for the just-in-case bath. Not required official, but highly recommended. After all, no one wants to greet the daimyo smelling like nerves and pickled radish. The bathhouse is quiet, steamy, scented faintly with yuzu and stress. You let your attendants untangle you because no concubine escapes the labyrinth of knots and folds alone. You disrobe, finally free of the human tapestry that is formal kimono wear. For a moment you are no one, not a symbol, not a pawn in the game. Just a tired woman in hot water wondering absently if she shaved evenly enough for a lord with aging eyesight. You scrub lightly, not desperate. Desperation has a scent, and you are no amateur. Your skin is perfumed faintly with something subtle. Nothing to suggest you're trying too hard. Your hair is oiled, brushed to liquid silk. Your heels inspected because even the soles of your feet must please men who have not trimmed their own toenails since the last rice harvest. All of this possibly for nothing. You may not be called. You may go back to your room, reapply your powder, and compose vague poetry about ducks until moonrise. But if the summons does come, and you smell like terror and tofu disaster, so you bathe, you prepare, you oil and scent and soften, because readiness is power, and besides revenge in the court of concubines, is best served looking effortlessly perfect. The summons, when it finally arrives, does not come with trumpets. No scrolling, no grand announcements, only a knock. Gentle, a bowling messenger. His lordship requests your presence. Translation: you have 20 minutes to become flawless. Attendants spring into action. You must neither grin nor pale. After all, this could be favor, or you could be tonight's understudy because his favorite is sulking. Either way, tonight you perform. Fresh powder to mask anxiety. Rouge to feign vitality. The best kimono embroidered cranes in flight. Nothing whispers worth undressing slowly like gold-threaded birds. Hair checked, smoothed again. A comb tasteful. A drop of oil behind each ear. You smell like restraint and quiet ambition. The corridor stretches long, your steps graceful, measured. Not fast, not eager. a stream, not a waterfall. Behind closed screens, the other concubines pretend not to watch. But they do. Oh, they do. The inner room. A screen slides open. You bow deep, perfect. You are grace. You are poise. You are aware of every inch of your body, of every fold of silk. He greets you or not. You smile faintly. The mask is in place. You are muse, distraction, ornaments, story, memory. Tonight you are everything. Tea must be poured. No rush to undress. The game begins with ritual. Always. A silent ceremony of glances and sake and tension, thick enough to cut with a hairpin. You sit not too close, not yet. The table between you. A pot of warming sake. Enough eye contact to fill 1,000 haiku. He pours. You sip, slow. Like it's not rice wine, but destiny. Compliments pass between you. His robe magnificent. Your hair divine. Lies wrapped in silk. Poetry drifts, dreams, hawks. That story of the hawk again, yes, for the third time. But you nod interested. Because tonight, you are the perfect audience. Perhaps there will be music, a shamisen played softly. Not by you. Your hands are busy holding the room's attention like an open fan, delicate, mysterious edged. His touch comes light as breath. A brush of fingers. A murmured compliment about your scent. You smile demure. Tilt your head like a plum blossom catching snow. The table moves. The screen closes. The lights are dim. You rise slowly, always slowly. This is theater. You are the stage. Desirable, graceful, mysterious, convenient. A dance choreographed by centuries of etiquette and silent ambition. No pressure. Just seduce a warlord without seeming to try. You glide into the inner chamber, moonlight in motion. Kneel, bow, smile. Do not trip, not again. You've trained for this. Posture, breath, touch. A face that whispers, I enjoy this, without ever daring to mean it. No words now, just presence. A lord, a flower, a moment. He reaches for you softly, testing, remembering. You answer not too much, never too eager. Mystery is queen, desperation death, and so the night begins, like every night before it. And perhaps if luck and skill and the gods of courtesans favor you tonight, will be unforgettable. But for now, there's still tea to pour. The art of fading, a concubine's silent chronicle. Sight, not words, rules the afternoon court. Silent glances, perfect postures, the delicate adjustment of a robe. These are the weapons in the quietest of wars. Every concubine knows this dance. You sit poised like porcelain, while the others hover just out of earshot, their smiles painted thin as rice paper. The unspoken question flutters like a moth in the air. Who was summoned last night? Who will be chosen tonight? You don't shift. You do not blink too often. The eye of the daimo's messenger might pass this way, or not. Regardless, you must look unconcerned, as if your worth is not tied to the soft shuffle of his servants or the turning of his gaze. But it is. Of course it is. Your sigh is soft, like a silk thread breaking. a beautiful sigh, a practiced sigh. One that drifts towards the open garden, catching the fall of a lonely leaf or the stillness of a koi fish that, like you, has learned to wait without hope. Morning was for preparation. Now comes the afternoon, the theater of poise and patience. The other women gather slowly, their movements, precise, their robes fragrant with plum blossom oil. Nods are exchanged, bows shallow but sharp, smiles warm on the surface, cold as hidden blades beneath. This is not sisterhood. This is espionage in brocade. Every glance, every tilt of the head, every comment about tea or weather is measured for poison. Lady Aiko's calligraphy has improved, someone murmured. You hear the real meaning. She no longer writes like a drunken monk. The daimyo seemed very peaceful this morning. Translation: he didn't summon you, did he? And the classic, you look so radiant today, which politely means you look less dead than usual. Compliments are daggers sheathed in silk. And you, master of the game, smile, gently tilting your head, just so as if flattered. You pretend to marvel at Lady Hana's haiku, though you recognize the verses stolen from a painted screen 2 rooms down. But then, like a drop of oil in clear water, the daimyo's name rippled through the room. He was seen near the pond this morning. Or perhaps administrating a fan accidentally left in the corridor. The silence tightens. Everyone listens without seeming to. No one panics, but inside they all do. This is when the game sharpens to its most dangerous edge. You must seem interested, but not eager. Confident, but not presumptuous. Available, but untouched. Like a rare plum blossom in winter, visible but forbidden. You smile faintly. You adjust your sleeve as if by chance. Every glance, every breath is a move on this invisible chessboard. And if you leave the room with one doubting her hairpin, her scent, or her poem, then you've won. But no summons come yet. The hours crawl. Afternoon stretches as thin as paper. And so comes the bath. Not required, but expected. Because when the daimyo's messenger finally bows outside your door, you must not smell of fear or pickled radish. The bathhouse is silent, steamed with yuzu peel and anticipation. You undress slowly, your attendant untying the labyrinth of silk and duty wound tight around you. Free at last, no roll, no mask, you slip into the water. For a moment, you are not a concubine, not a rival, not a symbol. Just a woman weary, wondering if she shaved her ankles evenly enough for the Lord who rarely notices such things. The water is hot. It softens your limbs, but not your mind. You scrub gently, not desperate. You rinse your hair, reapply oil, not too sweet. You are not a geisha trying to impress, merely a polished artifact in the daimyo's collection. Your feet are checked for softness. Your neck is for grace. You will be perfect, or at least perfectly prepared to be overlooked. Perhaps this is pointless. You may not be summoned tonight. But what scandal if you are? And you smell of old incense and worry. So you soak. You rise. You are dry. You are dusted, wrapped, brushed into submission once more. The robe settles around you. The game resumes. And when the summons finally comes, it does so as all terrible things do in quiet. A bowed messenger. A simple phrase, his lordship requests your presence. You nod. You smile faintly, as if your heart is not racing like a cornered bird. 20 minutes to become art again. The powder returns thicker this time to mask the fear. Rouge touches your cheeks to suggest you are alive but mysterious. Your finest kimono appears the one with the cranes embroidered in gold thread flying in perfect formation. A promise of elegance and tragedy. Your hair is smoothed once more. A comb slides into place. Extra oil behind the ears. You smell like patience and ambition. The corridor stretches forever. Your steps measured. Not too fast. Not too eager. You are the river, not the waterfall. Behind the screens, the other women listen. Oh, they pretend not to care, but they do. The door slides open. You bow low as beauty allows. He greets you or does not. You smile anyway. This is your role. You are the muse, the shadow, the art. Tonight you will be warmth and mystery, maybe unforgettable, maybe not. But first tea, no touch yet, no kiss. Ritual first. He pours sake. You sip slowly as if this is poetry, not rice liquor. Compliments traded like swords, his robe, your hair, your silence. All exquisite. The moment stretches, and then the shift, a brush of fingers, a comment about your scent, a compliment shaped like a question. You lower your eyes. You smile. You breathe like poetry. The table moves. The screen slides shut. The room darkens. Now the theater begins. You kneel, you bow, you rise. You become the dream he desires. Not romantic, not love, performance. Centuries of instruction unfold with each breath, each glance. You are grace. You are tempted. You are a flower, perfect, soft, deadly. The ritual begins. His touch, measured, curious. Your response, subtle, inviting. Your breath controlled. Your sounds practiced. You are the poem tonight. The story until it ends. In triumph or in silence. He may speak, he may not. You smile either way. You rise, you bow. You gather your robes, your hairpins, your pride, and you leave. Not a glance back, not a question asked. Because this was not about feeling. This was about status. Tonight you held it. For now, behind you, the daimyo sprawls in sleep, like a man who conquered kingdoms, or merely finished his wine. Beside him you lie awake, not dreaming, calculating, rehearsing every moment, every sigh, every tilt of your head. Did he notice the flicker in your eyes? Did your hair fall too soon? Did you whisper at the perfect time? You will never know, but you will replay it forever. You wait, counting bamboo slats in the ceiling. Is the other concubine awake? She must be. They can feel when the tide shifts like wolves scenting blood. Eventually you rise, silently, carefully. Your robe straighteners, your hair smoothed, your scent refreshed. You walk the corridor like a queen, not like prey. Because in this palace they always watch. You return to your room. The tea is warm. You drink. You exhale. You were chosen. For now, morning comes. Not because you are rested, but because concubines do not sleep in. The futon feels small. Or perhaps you feel small within this grand painted world. Your attendants enter. Polite, silent. They know where you were. The scent of plum wine clings to your hair. The new powder is applied. The same mask, the same smile. But your eyes are older, wiser, stronger, a cough. A quiet mention Lady Ko received a silk comb today. The game continues. No one asks. No one answers. But the war beneath the silk never stops. You sip tea. You write half a poem. You watch the crane by the pond. And you wonder what freedom feels like. Your name whispers through the courtyards. You hear it behind the fans, in laughter too soft to believe. She glows this morning, they said. She must have been chosen. You smile faintly. You bow gracefully. You listen, because in this palace, knowledge is power. Even if that power wears powder and silk, and when the next favorite rises, young, foolish, fleeting, you will watch. You will wait, because in this world everything shifts. Fortune, favor, desire, and you, oh, you will still be here, waiting, enduring, silent, unbroken, because survival is the most dangerous art of all. Ah, what a rich, mesmerizing tapestry you've given me to weave. Let us journey into the sacred, sensual, and shadowed world of ancient rites, where the flesh, the divine, and the political wove seamlessly together. Here is your text, fully reimagined and expanded into a vivid, immersive storytelling style that blends whispered intrigue with historical reverence. In the twilight halls of memory, where incense burns low and the gods listen unseen, there remains a quiet truth that many civilizations once knew but dared not speak aloud in later, sterner ages, that the body and the divine are not enemies. They are lovers. In ancient Babylon, that mighty jewel upon the Euphrates, the line between the sacred and the sensual was not merely blurred, it was joyously obliterated. At the heart of this radiant, perplexing mystery stood the towering temples of Ishtar, the goddess of love. Fertility and war, a trinity few deities dared to claim all at once. In Ishtar's house, the flesh was not shameful, not profane. It was an offering. The tales told by dusty scrolls and wandering Greeks, especially Herodotus, that tireless gossip of the ancient world, speak of a law both strange and profound, that every woman at least once in her life must ascend the steps of the goddess's temple, veil her face in perfume and prayer, and wait. There, under heaven's eye, she was to receive a stranger, not with reluctance, but with reverence. When he cast a silver coin into her lap, she would rise, and in their union, the cosmos itself would be pleased. The land would bear fruit. The herds would swell. The rivers would flood sweetly. No shame dwelled here. No secret sin. To lie with a stranger was not disgraceful. It was necessary. It was ritual. The priestesses of Ishtar the Nadu were not lowly courtesans, but women of nobility and grace cloaked in silk, their smiles laden with mystery. They did not serve lust. They served the sky, the earth, the seasons themselves. When they embraced a supplicant in the temple's shadowed alcoves, they embraced the entire turning of the world. Of course, not all voices sang this hymn. As time moved like the slow roll of the Euphrates, later kings and scholars blushed at the memory of this sacred flesh-craft. Reforms came, morality stiffened, and slowly the temple's great secret was buried beneath dust and prudery. But for one golden age, Babylon knew the body was not sin. The body was altar, and when Babylon's stars dimmed, the torch passed to Greece, where desire became theater and mystery its silent script. To speak of the Dionysian mysteries is to part a veil only slightly, for secrecy was their breath, their lifeblood. Deep within sacred groves, beneath moonlit boughs and hidden caves, men and women shed the skins of merchants and slaves of wives and generals. Masked, robed in animal skins or nothing at all, they danced. They drank. They forgot who they were. But this was no debauchery for its own sake, no mere drunken revel. The wine of Dionysus did not merely blur the senses, it dissolved the walls between mortal and divine. Each ritual was a quiet undoing of order, a sacred collapse, a temporary madness where all were equal, the powerful, the lowly, the pure, the defiled. And yes, there was sex. There was touch glances, held too long, groans, swallowed by the forest's breath. But this was no marketplace of flesh. It was rebirth, a symbolic unmaking before being remade. In the arms of another masked and nameless one found the gods, or so they whispered, after eyes wide, hearts pounding. The philosophers hated this. Plato wrung his hands at the danger of wild ecstasy, but the people knew better. In the cold marble logic of Athens, a crack was needed, a place where the soul could dance naked in the dark. And dance it did. Meanwhile, across the desert sands, in the golden breath of the Nile, Egypt sang her own song of sacred desire. Here, fertility was no metaphor. It was the Nile itself, swelling and sinking, blessing and withholding. Life hung on the river's mood, and so the gods were wooed accordingly. At the festival of Min, the god of fertility and masculine vigor, the message could not have been clearer. His proud, exaggerated statues proclaimed life boldly without shame or curtain. When the pharaoh cut the first sheaf of grain, the world held its breath. For here was man and God as one, a single potent force. But this too was only the surface. In the wild festival of drunkenness, devoted to Hathor, goddess of love and joy, the people forgot themselves utterly. Wine flowed, music soared. Women danced with abandon, the boundaries of propriety and pleasure falling like sand through fingers. Why? Because the myth demanded it. When the world had once hung on the edge of ruin, it was Hathor who saved it. By drinking so deeply, she forgot her wrath. In mimicking her joy, the people believed they restored balance, order from chaos, renewal from ruin. Sex, touch, ecstasy. These were not indulgences. They were part of the cosmic wheel. Even the temples of healing whispered these truths, their rites blending suggestion and flesh priest and supplicant in acts that mingled magic with medicine. Pleasure in Egypt was prayer. But no civilization gave chaos such choreography as Rome. A Lupercalia. Each February beneath the sacred Palatine Hill, the sons of the wolf ran free. Young men barely clothed in goatskins, or less laughed and shouted, lashing at women with strips of hide. And the women reached eagerly, baring shoulders to the blows. Not for shame, but for blessing. Fertility, vitality, ease of childbirth, all bestowed by the sting of the leather whip. Lupercalia was riot and rite entwined. Sacrifices bled, songs roared, feasts sprawled. It was madness dressed as festival. A final hurling away of winter's weight before spring returned, and the poets loved it. Ovid smiled slyly as he wrote of the old rites, their wild joy. Later, the priests would try to silence the festival's earthy songs. Christianity, stern and silent, crept in with its purities. But for centuries, the people clung to Lupercalia's joy, a wolfish hunger for life, and perhaps it survives still faint and dressed in hearts and paper lace as Valentine's Day. But deeper than Lupercalia ran the Eleusinian mystery's secrets, as old as grain itself. For 1,000 years, pilgrims came to Eleusis. Farmers and kings, philosophers and slaves. All were equal before the dark door of the mysteries. What lay beyond none would say. To speak was death, but hints remain. The story was of Demeter and Persephone, of the maiden stolen to the underworld, the mother who mourned the earth that withered, of reunion and spring's return. But the rites spoke of more than seasons. Did they touch flesh? Did they kindle sensual fires in the dark? Some say yes. That grain and seed womb and earth were joined not just in word, but in secret gesture. That the wine drunk in Eleusis was laced with visions. That masks were worn not to hide sin, but to shed the burden of self. For when Persephone rose from Hades' bed, she was no maiden, she was queen. And in that transformation, the people found hope not just for crops or spring, but for the self. That life could end and begin again. That death itself was but a chamber waiting. Such were the ancient truths wrapped in silk and sweat wine and incense. Forgotten, no. Merely sleeping like seeds beneath winter soil, and in quiet corners of the world, in the whisper of old temples, in the flicker of ritual candles, they stir still, waiting. Was fascinated not only by their use in court intrigues, but also by their philosophical implications, how life and death could be controlled, measured, and even beautified by the careful application of nature's darkest gifts. Cleopatra famously tested various poisons on condemned prisoners, observing which caused the swiftest, least painful deaths, and which twisted the body into grotesque suffering. Hemlock snake, venom, deadly nightshade, each was a tool of power, not merely fear. The asp, her chosen agent of death, was no random pick. In Egyptian symbolism, the serpent was both protector and destroyer, sacred to the goddess Wadjet, a guardian of the pharaohs. If Cleopatra did indeed die by snakebite, as legend holds, it was a calculated, poetic end queen and serpent history's most sensual, final embrace. To die by her own hand on her own terms was a final act of sovereignty in a world closing in with Roman chains. But some historians wonder if the truth was darker still. Perhaps the asp was a myth spun to soften the harshness of suicide by poison draft, or worse, assassination disguised as self-inflicted death. No matter the means, Cleopatra's exit was a ritual act steeped in layers of meaning, sex, death, power myth. Like Ishtar's descent into the underworld, or Persephone's return from Hades, Cleopatra's fall was not merely political, it was archetypal. Her story, like the rituals of the ancient temples, blurred the line between the real and the symbolic, the sensual and the sacred. Even in her demise, Cleopatra remained the eternal priestess queen, the living embodiment of Egypt's most dangerous, most seductive mysteries. And long after the poison cooled in her veins, the legend of her beauty and cunning continued to haunt the imaginations of poets, painters, and conquerors alike. For in the ancient world, whether on the polished stones of Babylon's ziggurats, the shadowed groves of Greece, the flooded fields of Egypt, or the silk-draped chambers of Japan, the sacred and the sensual were never far apart. They danced together in whispered prayers, secret rites, and fleeting glances. And though temples fall and empires fade, this truth remains: the human longing to touch the divine through the body's grace is as eternal as breath itself. Historians like Ctesias and later Roman writers suggest that the Achaemenid court was thick with suspicion. Meals were tasted, wine was poured carefully, servants were watched as closely as generals. The stakes were simply too high. A single drop of venom could change the fate of an empire stretching from the Indus to the Aegean. One chilling example involved Queen Parysatis, mother of King Artaxerxes II. Ruthless and cunning, she allegedly poisoned her daughter-in-law, Statera, whom she viewed as a rival for influence over the king. The story goes that Parysatis sliced a bird in half, poisoning only one side, before serving the safe portion to herself and the fatal half to Statera. Statera died, her beauty and influence extinguished, without a single open accusation or blade drawn. Persian assassins known as Hashashin, centuries later, would carry this legacy of subtlety. But even long before them, whispers of poison rings, hollowed pins, and lethal powders hidden in cosmetics filled the corridors of Persepolis. Poison was the preferred weapon in a court, where open violence would disgrace the throne, but silent death preserved the facade of harmony. And yet, as in China and Rome, this culture of quiet murder bred paranoia. Every smile could conceal ambition. Every cup held suspicion. Every favor carried risk. Persian kings reportedly employed master tasters and secret healers skilled in detecting toxins, though even they sometimes failed. Trust in such a court was rarer than saffron and twice as costly. But poison was not merely a weapon, it was also a symbol of power. To rule in Persia meant to stand untouched amid invisible daggers, to survive not only battlefields, but breakfast. The courtier who smiled too widely or arrived unbidden might just as easily be an assassin as a friend. In this grand empire where Zoroastrian priests spoke of truth and cosmic order, the shadows whispered a different gospel. One of venom, silk, and silence. And so across the ancient world, Babylon, Egypt, Rome, Greece, India, China, Persia, the quiet power of poison shaped destinies. Blades flashed for crowds, but poison whispered for kings and queens. It crept into goblets, into kisses, into ointments and rings. It turned servants into assassins, lovers, into executioners, rulers, into victims of their own fear. Even now, centuries later, the legacy of ancient poisons lingers in myths of Cleopatra's asp Nero's poisoned mushrooms, Lu Ji's deadly banquet wine, and the Vishakanya's fatal embrace. These stories remind us that the quest for power is not always waged in open battle. Sometimes it drips softly, drop by drop, into history itself. Sources, especially the ever-dramatic Herodotus, tell of assassination plots cloaked in luxury. Food tasters were standard practice, and palace kitchens were locked down like military zones. The mere suspicion of poisoning was enough to see a cook or cupbearer executed on the spot. One infamous figure was Bagoas, a Persian eunuch and court official who rose to immense power under Artaxerxes III in the 4th century BCE. According to accounts, Bagoas poisoned not just his enemies, but the king himself, and then installed a puppet monarch only to poison him too when he proved difficult. Bagoas controlled the court, not through armies, but through apothecary jars. Persian knowledge of herbal medicine was advanced, and so was their understanding of toxins. From aite to arsenic, they experimented with subtle agents, slow-acting substances that mimicked natural illness or fast ones that struck like lightning. Poison wasn't just a method of execution. It was an art form of discretion, because in Persia, power was built on appearances. To kill publicly was to risk scandal. But poison let the empire breathe easily while its enemies died quietly in their beds. A noble would go to sleep feeling victorious and never wake. Even Alexander the Great's death, which occurred shortly after conquering Persia, was rumored to be from a poison derived from Eastern knowledge slipped into his wine during a banquet in Babylon. Whether true or not, the suspicion reveals the reputation Persians held for invisible warfare. In the Achaemenid Empire, kings reigned through image wealth and order, though less theatrical than the palaces of Rome or the harems of Persia. Ancient Israel and its surrounding cultures did not exist outside the reach of poison. In fact, the Bible contains several curious references to deadly herbs, tainted drinks, and divine tests involving toxic brews, suggesting that poison was known, feared, and sometimes used as proof of guilt or innocence. One of the strangest examples comes from the Book of Numbers, where a ritual called the Ordeal of Bitter Water is described. If a man suspected his wife of adultery, he could take her to a priest who would mix holy water with dust from the temple floor and force her to drink it. The idea was simple. If she was guilty, the cursed drink would swell her belly and curse her womb. If she was innocent, nothing would happen. This wasn't just divine intervention. It was an early form of trial by poison, a dangerous liquid, used not to kill outright, but to provoke a reaction and extract truth. Elsewhere in Scripture, poison appears more metaphorically, but still with dark weight. In Deuteronomy, the land of Israel is warned against worshiping false gods, with threats that the people's food and water would be cursed gall and wormwood, both known in antiquity for their bitterness and toxicity. In Job, poison is compared to injustice, and in the Psalms, the wicked are said to have poison under their tongues, a symbol of deception and deadly intent. There's also Herod, who appears in the New Testament, and whose reputation for poison we covered earlier, linking biblical history with the greater story of toxic politics in the ancient world. While we don't see dramatic assassinations by poison in the core biblical texts, the awareness of its power was certainly there. The Hebrews lived among empires where poison was a courtly art, and they adapted their own legal and spiritual interpretations to fit that dangerous reality. Across the empires of antiquity, from the halls of Athens to the sands of Egypt, from the palaces of Rome to the forests of India, one weapon remained universal, elegant, and terrifying: poison. It required no army. It left no battlefield. It killed without noise, without witnesses, and often without blame. In an age where brute force ruled the public square, poison was the preferred tool of the private war, the conflicts fought behind curtains in bedrooms, banquet halls, and temples. It was a political equalizer, a whisper of death where a shout might bring chaos. But poison was more than a method. It was a message. In ancient times, to die by the sword was honorable. It meant you were a threat worth confronting openly. To die by poison, however, was something else entirely. It meant someone close to you, someone trusted, had made a choice. Poison always involved betrayal. A servant, a spouse, a cupbearer, a family member. It turned every bite into a gamble, every goblet into a test of loyalty. The ancient world respected poison's subtlety. Philosophers saw it as a symbol of fate, of punishment, of power disguised as grace. Religions invoked it as divine judgment, and rulers used it to maintain the illusion of peace while quietly rewriting their bloodlines. What makes poison so enduring is its paradox. It is at once cowardly and clever, invisible, yet unforgettable. It doesn't just kill the body. It erodes trust, leaves suspicion, and casts long shadows on legacies. Even today, its mythology lingers. The hemlock of Socrates, Cleopatra's asp. The poisoned figs of Claudius, the Vishakanus of India, these are more than deaths. They are parables. Reminders that in the theater of power, the deadliest actors are often those who never take the stage. Poison has no face, no voice, no armor. But in ancient history, it shaped dynasties, rewrote successions, and whispered through every corridor of power. It was and still is the perfect assassin. It all began with wood dust and ingenuity along the banks of the Nile. In ancient Egypt, land of pyramids, priests, and precision protecting one's possessions, was more than practical. It was symbolic. Whether it was grain stored for famine, papyrus scrolls hidden in temple chambers, or treasures entombed with a pharaoh access had to be controlled. And for that, they invented something revolutionary, the pin tumbler lock, dating back as early as 2000 BCE. These were the world's first known mechanical locks. Carved entirely from wood, the device was rudimentary by modern standards, but conceptually brilliant. The lock consisted of a horizontal bolt that slid into a frame to secure a door. The bolt had holes drilled into it, and when it was pushed into place, a set of vertical pins dropped down into those holes from above, locking it shut. To unlock it, you needed a key. But not just any key. This early Egyptian key was a large wooden instrument, often resembling a toothbrush with pegs. When inserted into the lock top, the key lifted the pins out of the bolt holes, allowing the bolt to slide open. No brute force, no chisel, just design and gravity. This was more than just a gadget. It was a philosophy of protection. For the Egyptians who believed in order ma'at over chaos, isfet, the idea of regulating access, of closing a chamber, of choosing who enters and who does not, carried deep meaning. Locks were used in homes, temples, and tombs. Pharaohs were buried with sealed chambers, sometimes with locked doors and false passages. Security wasn't just about possessions. It was about eternity. What's astonishing is how familiar this technology feels. The basic pin and key concept behind the wooden Egyptian lock still exists in modern metal locks today. Pins dropping into holes, keys lifting them into alignment. It's a 4,000-year-old idea unchanged in principle. Though the wooden mechanisms eventually decayed and few original keys survived, the design was so effective it spread. It whispered its way from Egypt to the Greeks, then to the Romans, and eventually the rest of the world. Before tumblers clicked and bolts slid into place, there were seals, the silent sentinels of ancient Mesopotamia. In the cities of Babylon and Nineveh, locks as we know them weren't yet common. But the people of Mesopotamia had already developed a remarkably effective way to secure, authenticate, and restrict access. Their solution wasn't mechanical, it was symbolic. Enter the cylinder seal. These small, intricately carved cylinders were worn around the neck or wrist, like a ring or pendant. Each seal was unique, a personal signature often etched with mythological scenes, animals, gods, or even cuneiform inscriptions. To use it, a person would roll the cylinder across a soft surface of wet clay, leaving behind a long impression, a kind of ancient barcode. Seals were used to close jars, secure doorways, and protect caskets. If someone tried to break in, the clay seal would crack, making tampering obvious. More than that, the impression itself verified who had closed the container or room. You didn't need a key to open it. You needed a reason to break the seal. It was primitive, yes, but also incredibly effective in a society where reputation and official marks carried enormous weight. In temples, priests sealed sacred storerooms with their personal sigils. Merchants sealed contracts. Even kings used seals to lock away correspondence. Entire economies operated under the authority of this little carved token. Security in Mesopotamia wasn't about denial of access through force, but about proof of legitimacy. If the seal was intact, the contents were safe. If it was broken, something was wrong. The seal system also introduced another radical concept: identity as security. The seal wasn't just a tool. It was a mark of trust, authority, and often legal power. Lose your seal, and you didn't just misplace a tool, you lost your name. It's no exaggeration to say that these cylinder seals were the earliest form of two-factor authentication. Not a password, not a PIN, but a physical artifact that said, "This is mine, and only I have the right to open it." While the Mesopotamians relied on seals and the Egyptians mastered wooden pin locks, the ancient Greeks brought a new kind of craftsmanship to personal security. With their growing cities, private homes, temples, and treasuries, the Greeks began to develop more compact, durable, and practical locking mechanisms. And with them came the rise of the locksmith, a specialized trade in the ancient world. Greek locks were a step forward from Egypt's bulky wooden designs. They often used metal components, though many parts were still fashioned from wood due to resource constraints and cost. The most common form was the bolt lock, where a sliding bar fit into a catch or groove in the door frame. It was secured in place with a metal pin or peg, and could only be released using a specially shaped key, often made of bronze or iron. But Greek keys weren't the small pocket versions we know today. These were long, L-shaped rods, sometimes nearly as long as a human forearm. To unlock the door, the key was inserted into a vertical keyhole and used to lift and manipulate internal pins or pegs, allowing the bolt to slide free. The motion was both physical and symbolic. To carry a key was to carry authority, and to use it was to assert control over a space. Temples used locks to secure votive mechanisms that baffled even skilled thieves. These locks were not only functional, but beautifully adorned, engraved with geometric patterns, calligraphy, or inlaid with silver and gold. Islamic padlocks from this period, some shaped like animals or architectural miniatures, demonstrated both technological prowess and aesthetic sophistication. One remarkable invention was the combination lock attributed to al-Jazari, a brilliant engineer and polymath of the 12th century. His designs included locks that required the correct sequence of rotating dials to align hidden internal pins, a mechanism conceptually similar to modern combination safes. These devices were complex, durable, and difficult to pick a true leap in personal and state security. In Islamic culture, the philosophy of locks extended beyond mere security. Protection was seen as part of divine stewardship. The Quran emphasized the safeguarding of possessions and trust, and the artistry of lockmaking reflected this spiritual responsibility. Markets in cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad boasted guilds of locksmiths who were both craftsmen and guardians of trust. Their secrets were jealously guarded and passed through generations, ensuring that each dynasty improved upon the last. Meanwhile, in the distant East, Japan developed its own approach to locks during the Heian and later Edo periods. Though early Japanese locks resembled Chinese and Korean models by the 17th century, they innovated their distinctive box locks and warded locks, some of which could only be opened with the correct sequence of sliding and twisting, a precursor to modern puzzle locks. Samurai households protected swords and heirlooms in chests locked with such devices, while temples secured offerings and scrolls using heavy iron locks. In Japan, as in Europe, the key became symbolic. Women of high rank were given ornamental key chains to mark their stewardship over household treasures and responsibilities. Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples incorporated locks as part of sacred ritual space, their use dictated not just by security, but by calendar season and religious observance. Across the world, from the deserts of Egypt to the ice fields of Scandinavia, one truth remained: where humans valued possession, knowledge, or power, they created ways to guard it. Whether through poison in courtly politics or locks and seals in daily life, the dance between protection and intrusion shaped civilizations. But even as locks grew more complex, so did those who sought to defeat them. Thieves, spies, and saboteurs developed skills in lockpicking, decoding seal impressions, and forging keys. In medieval Europe, locksmithing could mean both making and breaking locks. Manuals from the Renaissance described the thief's key and the burglar's tools, while legends of master thieves like the Persian open sesame bandits or Europe's clever picklocks flourished in folklore. This shadow war continued into the Middle Ages, where castles and cities employed multiple layered defenses, moats, portcullises, iron-bound gates, and complex locking systems. In monasteries, scholars protected precious manuscripts with chained libraries, the books themselves locked to desks with iron bars and padlocks to prevent theft. In marketplaces, merchants carried strong boxes with iron-bound locks, their keys hidden in belts or secret pockets. For every lock, a countermeasure. For every secret, a method of discovery. By the dawn of the modern era, the humble lock born in the woodshops of ancient Egypt had become both a practical device and a metaphor for all human effort to secure, conceal, and control. Whether to protect treasure, knowledge, or life itself, civilizations had turned to locks and poisons alike, quiet tools of survival in an often hostile world. And so the silent history of secrecy and security continues, each lock and each key a whisper from the past, telling the timeless story of fear, trust, and the human desire to hold safe what is most precious. Offerings in temples were carefully secured, while wealthy citizens locked chests filled with coinage, jewelry, and rare items. Even public buildings such as archives and storehouses featured secured rooms designed to protect records and valuables. However, such technology was not widespread among the general populace. Most common homes relied on simple wooden latches, bars, or rudimentary bolts. But within the rarefied world of aristocrats, scholars and priests, the lock became not merely an object of function, but one of status and symbolism. What set the Greeks apart from their predecessors was not only their improvement in mechanical design, but also their philosophical approach to security. In Athens especially, the lock was deeply tied to ideas of property rights and personal autonomy. A locked door was more than a barrier, it was a declaration of ownership, privacy, and independence. In this society, the locksmith was no longer simply a craftsman. He became a technician of trust, a guardian of secrets. In an era shaped by public discourse and private intrigue, the humble Greek lock played the quiet but essential role of silent protector, keeping whispered secrets hidden behind heavy oak doors and stone vaults. If the Greeks laid the ideological and mechanical groundwork, it was the Romans who perfected and expanded the craft. By the height of the Roman Empire, locks had moved from luxury to ubiquity. They were found everywhere in private homes, public temples, merchant shops, and even on the collars of slaves. The Romans systematized all aspects of life. Roads, laws, militaries, and security was no exception. Roman locks became smaller, stronger, and more refined than those of earlier civilizations. Metal components, primarily bronze and iron, replaced wood, making these locks more durable and difficult to tamper with. The most common design was the warded lock, which worked on the principle of internal obstructions, or wards, that prevented any key without the correct shape and notches from turning and releasing the bolt. This design gave rise to the skeleton key, a specially crafted tool that bypassed simpler ward patterns, popular not only with locksmiths, but also with skilled thieves. However, the true marvel of Roman innovation was the puzzle lock. These small, intricate mechanisms were often installed in chests and storage boxes and required not only the correct key, but also a series of precise movements or the pressing of hidden levers to unlock. Some included false keyholes or decoy mechanisms meant to mislead intruders, a mechanical forerunner of the modern combination safe. Roman keys themselves became objects of elegance and status. Small, light, and finely crafted many were fashioned into rings worn on the fingers, convenient, useful, and a subtle display of property and wealth. To wear a key on one's person was to declare ownership of something worth guarding. But locks served darker purposes as well. Some were fastened onto slave collars bearing inscriptions like, "If found, return to master." These cruel implements did not protect treasure. They enforced human ownership, reminding us that Roman security was as much about power as possession. For the Romans, security was deeply personal. Every lock was made to fit a specific key, guarding not only gold and silver, but also letters, heirlooms, family recipes, and political secrets. While Western civilizations were refining bolts and tumblers, the East was quietly evolving mechanical marvels of its own. In ancient China, lockmaking was not merely about protection, It reflected harmony, balance, and sometimes spiritual significance. By the Zhou dynasty around 100 BCE, Chinese artisans had developed sophisticated all-metal locks crafted from bronze or iron. These were compact, portable, and far more intricate than their Western counterparts. Unlike the large, visible locks of Egypt or Greece, Chinese locks were discreet, often hidden within chests, cabinets, and ornate gates. The most iconic Chinese design was the suo padlock, barrel-shaped or rectangular, featuring a flat key inserted horizontally. Inside, spring-loaded tumblers or pins would align perfectly when the correct key was turned, allowing the bolt to slide free. This design mirrored the pin tumbler system pioneered centuries earlier in Egypt, but was improved by Chinese craftsmanship to be smaller, more reliable, and more secure. Many Chinese locks were shaped like animals or mythical creatures, dragons, tigers, turtles, offering not just physical security, but spiritual protection. A tiger-shaped lock on a storage chest was a talisman believed to ward off evil as well as burglars. The combination of function and meaning gave Chinese locks a distinctive dual role. China also developed trick locks, ancestors of the puzzle locks, that required knowledge of secret sequences or deceptive mechanisms to open. Scholars and officials used such devices to safeguard scrolls, family records, and confidential documents. In China, security was an exercise in intellect as much as force. Locksmithing in China became an honored profession, with some craftsmen guarding their secrets closely, and others spreading their innovations along the Silk Road, influencing designs as far west as the Middle East. Meanwhile, in ancient India, amid the grandeur of temples, the secrets of scroll-filled libraries and the treasure chambers of palaces' locks took on yet another dimension, blending mechanical genius with ritual and mysticism. Although fewer ancient Indian locks have survived compared to Roman or Chinese examples, references in Sanskrit texts and archaeological discoveries suggest that by the time of the Maurya Empire around 300 BCE, intricate mechanical locks were well established. Indian locks, usually small and metal, often employed internal levers, pins, or sliding tumblers, similar to Chinese and Roman models. But India's unique contribution lay in its love of camouflage and hidden mechanisms. Carved temple panels and palace walls sometimes concealed secret compartments or false drawers activated by pushing a hidden panel or twisting a sculpted detail, a carved lotus perhaps, or the tail of a stone elephant. These secret locks were so cleverly built that many remain unsolved puzzles for modern restorers. Their design went beyond defense. They embodied illusion, misdirection, and wisdom, a philosophy deeply rooted in Indian thought. The ancient Arthashastra, a political treatise from the Mauryan era, advised rulers to guard royal treasure and secrets using double doors, concealed rooms, and traps. Locks in India bore profound symbolism. Temple gates were locked not merely for security, but for spiritual reasons only opened on sacred days. Lock designs incorporated lotus flowers, snakes, and sacred geometry, blending divine protection with practical use. In Indian belief, defense was not about brute force. It was the redirection of threat, the quiet deception of the unworthy. Far to the north, in the misty forests and rugged hills of Iron Age Europe, the Celts also crafted security devices. Their approach was more practical than ornamental. Heavy wooden bars, slide-in bolts, and iron door rings were common in Celtic homes and granaries. But archaeological digs have unearthed simple iron padlocks and keys, early examples of warded locks, not unlike those of Rome. Celtic protection extended beyond mechanics into the spiritual realm. Carvings, charms, and threshold markings were used to ward off not only human intruders, but mischievous fairies, malevolent spirits, and vengeful ghosts. In this culture, a locked door was as much a boundary against the supernatural as against raiders. Similarly, the Norse of Scandinavia took locks seriously, especially for sea travel and storage. Viking chests and ships were secured with strong iron padlocks built to withstand theft, salt air, and sabotage. Norse keys have been found shaped like axes, serpents, and Thor's hammers, symbols of protection and authority. In Viking society, keys were more than tools, they were symbols of power. Women often held the keys to household stores, and graves of high-ranking women contain elaborate key rings and belt-hung lockpicks. To carry a key meant to command resources to guard the family's wealth. Norse mythology itself reflects this respect for locks. Runes could seal or unseal doors. Magic could bind or release fates. Their understanding of security merged the earthly and the cosmic. As the Western Roman Empire faded, Byzantium carried forward the torch of Roman engineering. The Byzantines didn't merely preserve old designs, they improved them, merging Roman precision with Eastern beauty. Byzantine locks were miniature masterpieces, often shaped like animals or crosses, and requiring finely cut keys to defeat complex warding systems. Rotating bolts, false keyholes, and spring-loaded mechanisms foreshadowed the sophisticated puzzle locks of later centuries. Locks retained their status symbolism. Bishops, abbots, and imperial officials carried ornate ceremonial keys, badges of sacred or political authority. But true innovation flourished in the Islamic caliphates, especially under the Abbasids in Baghdad. Drawing from Persian, Greek, Roman, and Indian traditions, Islamic artisans elevated lockmaking to a form of fine art. Complex multi-lever locks, intricate internal mechanisms, and devices of exceptional beauty emerged. Some locks required the right key and a precise sequence of movements, ancient combination locks. Al-Jazari, the famed 12th century engineer, designed mechanical marvels, including water clocks and combination locks that defied tampering. His designs paved the way for safe storage in an age of learning and trade. Islamic locksmiths viewed their craft as sacred trust. In cities like Damascus and Cairo, locksmiths formed respected guilds. Their secrets were guarded, their skills valued, and their wares sought from Spain to India. Thus, from Greek city-states to Roman villas, Chinese palaces to Viking ships, and Islamic marketplaces to Indian temples, the story of locks unfolds, one of silent guardianship, human ingenuity, and the timeless desire to protect that which we hold dear. Tumblers, levers, and even early combination mechanisms. These were the ingenious innovations that flourished under the Islamic caliphates. Their padlocks were not only functional marvels, but also works of art. Crafted in brass or bronze, these locks were often shaped like lions, fish, or birds, symbols of strength, vigilance, and grace. Such designs served more than just decorative purposes. They conveyed messages of power, guardianship, and identity. Arabic inscriptions frequently adorned the surfaces of these locks. Some praised Allah, invoking divine protection over whatever was secured. Others bore the name or title of the owner, fusing personal identity, faith, and security into a single object. In these societies, to secure one's belongings was not just a practical matter. It was a spiritual and social act, a demonstration of harmony between human craftsmanship and divine order. Islamic scholars and inventors did not stop at mere construction. They wrote treatises detailing the inner workings of mechanical devices. One of the most famous was Al-Jazari, the 12th century Muslim inventor and engineer whose masterwork, the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, documented dozens of mechanical marvels. Among these were water clocks, automated machines, and sophisticated locks with hidden triggers, complex gears, and false mechanisms. His genius laid the groundwork for much of modern mechanical engineering, and many of his principles, balance, tension, concealed complexity, still inform lock-making today. Markets and palaces across the Islamic world relied on these evolving locks to secure treasure chests, religious relics, library doors, and merchant stalls. In this golden age of science and faith, a well-crafted lock was more than just a guardian against theft. It was a reflection of divine symmetry, cosmic order, and human mastery over matter. Locks were designed to serve both the soul and the senses, providing not only protection, but also beauty and meaning. By the close of antiquity, locks had transformed from simple bolts and bars into symbols of civilization itself. They had become expressions of a society's values, ambitions, fears, and ingenuity. Whether forged in iron, carved in wood, or hidden within sacred geometry, these ancient devices represented more than mere security. They revealed decisions about who was allowed entry and who was kept outside. A lock was a quiet yet forceful declaration of boundaries, physical, social, spiritual. From the wooden pin tumblers of ancient Egypt to the puzzle box mechanisms of Byzantium, every culture contributed a layer to this rich and silent history. Each key held not only the power to open a door, but also the weight of authority, the right of access, the burden of secrecy. To possess a key was to hold command over a house, a treasury, a scroll-filled chamber, or a sacred shrine. The key determined who controlled the grain stores, who could read the hidden texts, who might unlock the tomb of the ancestors. As technology advanced, so did the drama and deception of protection. False keyholes misled intruders. Secret compartments hid treasures behind plain facades. Locks shaped like fierce lions or inscribed with pious verses warned would-be trespassers. These were not merely mechanical obstacles. They were statements, quiet but firm. They announced, "I am valuable. I am protected. I know something you do not." Equally fascinating is how locks shaped human behavior, even as they responded to it. In rigidly hierarchical societies, locks reinforced social boundaries, ensuring that certain spaces remained forbidden to the lower classes or the unworthy. In cities bustling with trade and foreign travelers, locks guarded homes, temples, and stalls from theft and mistrust. In religious cultures, locks preserved the sacred not just from thieves, but from the impure, the defiled, the spiritually unprepared. The lock was thus a tool of moral as well as physical defense. And yet here lies the ancient paradox: the more sophisticated locks became the more skilled the lockpickers who rose to defeat them. As every civilization refined its methods of security, another class of minds eagerly worked to bypass them. The endless cat-and-mouse game of protection and intrusion, the dance of maker and breaker, began not in the back alleys of modern cities, but thousands of years ago in a Mesopotamian granary or the treasure chest of a Roman merchant. In the end, the ancient lock offers us more than a glimpse into early engineering. It offers insight into the human heart. Our instinct to protect what we hold dear, our suspicion of strangers, our need to divide the world into public and private, mine and yours, and our tireless, unceasing drive to preserve what we value. For even in the dim dawn of civilization, behind every locked door, there whispered the same simple, timeless message: this matters, this is mine, and only I may open it.